y'all were talking about Jason, Chairman Chaffetz. We get it. That's fine. Okay, you can sit and go back and forth all day saying, well, I don't know who it might be. I could guess, but I won't guess. I mean, in fact, y'all put out a separate press release that actually specifically mentioned the chairman. It said, and I don't know who John Adler is. Apparently, he's your national president. Quote, the chairman's actions boggle the rational mind. He's turning his committee into the fictional USS Kane as he subpoenas Secret Service law enforcement officers to his ship to count strawberries, end quote. I mean, that's about the chairman. The previous statements about the chairman. Let's just be honest with each other. It's a much better way to conduct a hearing. So I'll ask you a straight question. Do you think it helps?
No.
So why you do it?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I've been doing this now for 3 months, Mr. Mulvaney, and in that 3 months I've tried to tighten up our processes and procedures. If you notice in both those cases, and one of the, I guess, a nuance on this thing is it isn't from the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association, it's from their foundation that those 2 press releases came. And that Mr. Adler had been a president of FLEOA. He went over to the foundation, which is the charitable arm of our organization. Up until now, anybody who had an officer position had access to our letterhead press release type information. That's what you're referring to. But I got to tell you,
I hate to cut you off, but I mean, seriously, man, the headline, it says the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association. That's, again, this is a minor deal, but don't sit there and tell me it's your foundation, not the association. I mean, it's your.
I'm trying to be as candid as I can.
Is this your head? Is this your letterhead?
It's the foundation letterhead, if I'm not mistaken.
No, you are mistaken. It says Federal Law Enforcement Officers
Association. Then maybe it was under his
Association.
watch as the president, which is outside of mine.
Let's get to the thing. I mean, seriously, you're killing me with this. Let's have an honest conversation and not try and Inspector General Roth, here's I think the last question I want to ask about the topic, which is that the punishments. I think one of the things that frustrates us, that frustrates people back home, is that something deplorable did happen, something awful happened, that the Secret Service of the United States of America used private records about a sitting member of Congress to try and make him look bad and undermine his authority. In fact, I think you said something disturbing, which is that there's nothing to prevent that from happening again. So you telling me that today a Secret Service agent who doesn't like Mr. Cummings can go and start looking through your files for material on him. Is that a true statement?
It depends whether Mr. Cummings was either a protectee or an applicant. So obviously the Secret Service doesn't keep records on everyone, okay. But certainly other applicants who would be in, for example, Chairman Chaffetz's situation, those records still are there. They still don't have audit protection. It's unclear as to who has access to those records, and there's no way to detect that.
Will the gentleman yield for one question?
I will.
How did y'all know he was an applicant? How did Secret Service know that Chairman Chaffetz was an applicant?
According to our investigation, someone decided to look it up in MCI. There was a single individual in a field office who just decided to look it up, and from there it sort of spread throughout the Secret Service.
But to Mick's point, if you're going to run Chairman Chaffetz's name, you could run Ranking Member Cummings' name, you could run anyone's name.
Correct, but you may not find a record within the MCI system.
It was only because Chairman Chaffetz respected the Secret Service enough to actually apply.
That's correct.
Okay.
Staying on that, Mr. Roth, one of the things that frustrates us is that the penalties, no one was fired. I think everybody acknowledges that. We've got a report here that says that Homeland Security actually reduced the amount of discipline from an average of 8.5 days to 5.3 days, in part because DHS discovered that mishandling of the information was a common practice. Since when is that an excuse? I mean, you had an assistant director who encouraged the release of this information, but part of the justification for not penalizing that person was that, oh, well, everybody did it. Really, is that the defense, Mr. Doherty? That this was so common that y'all searched Mr. Cummings' records and mine or Mr. Gowdy's, that since everybody did it, it didn't deserve to be punishable?
So, Mr. Mulvaney, first of all, let me correct the record.
Okay,
Secret Service individuals, employees cannot access those records now. They are limited. That's one of the things that we did change over.
Are you disagreeing with Mr. Roth, or are you guys just using different terms for different things?
We're talking about what is in existence now versus what it was when they actually looked at us. But we have, in fact,
Mr. Roth,
this issue.
Yes, no, maybe?
That's certainly not our information at the time we did the audit. When you looked at the 5 different data systems, for example, Chairman Chaffetz's information was in 2 different systems. It was in the personnel system.
When was your audit, Mr.
Also-
Roth?
I'm sorry?
When was your audit?
I think our field work was done, completed at the beginning of 2016.
Are you
I don't
saying you
have that
fixed it
exact
since
date.
then, Mr. Doherty?
May I
That's
address
correct.
that, sir?
Let me
Sure,
refer to my
yeah.
colleague here, Mr. Mulvaney.
If it's been fixed, that's a good news, and we can move on.
It's been fixed.
Okay. Mr. Roth, do you mind taking another look at
I
that
can
again?
expound upon that if you'd like.
Certainly as part of our audit process, what we do is every 90 days, we take a look at what progress they've made, and we'll report on that.
All right. Well, if that's one thing that comes to the hearing, that at least this can't happen again, maybe that's good news. I wish we could talk more about what your agents are going through, all of them, because it sounds like something that would universally frustrate all of us up here. We'd like to help, but unfortunately, we've got other stuff to deal with as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. We'll recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as we discussed